some of those rear-end competitors about to be lapped at the moment. But the peculiar point-scoring situation in the series allows people like Phil Alexander, who's currently waving the leaders through, to be way up in points contention. They score quite a number of points, equal in fact to the outright leaders for a class win. Then the outright leaders only get a maximum of 5 points ahead of that for winning outright. So Ross Burbidge in the Alpha Sud currently lies third in the title on 43 points, and Phil Alexander lies fourth on 41, only respectively 1 point and 4 points behind Brian Sampson in second position.
The leading pair pulling away from Kevin Bartlett in third, and Fitzgerald, in fact, just as he locks up the left front, the lightest wheel in the car at that point, just looked as though he's getting away from Colin Bond, but that lock-up helped Bond get back close to him.
Fitzgerald running Michelin tyres, Bond on Toyo tyres, and one would hope that there's a lot of meat left on the front left-hand side Michelin for Peter Fitzgerald, because he's certainly using it up at an alarming rate. Again, Gary Walden tries to tuck underneath the Alfa Romeo of Jerry Murphy back in fifth slot. Brian Sampson just in front of him. And Bond cannot find a way around the Turbo Mitsubishi at the end of the main straight, but Fitzgerald knows that when it comes to the final lap, he'll have Bond clambering all over him at the end of the main straight, because Bond is close enough to do it.
About 188 kilometres an hour for the Starion turbos down the end of the straight. The Cordias, 4 of which making their debut here today, doing about 5 k's slower. The Alfa Romeo, pretty fast, virtue mainly of getting out of the corner onto the straight very well now with a limited slip differential. It's a V6, nearly 2.7 litres, a very torquey motor in road trim. A lot of Mitsubishi executives very interested in this, the progress of their 2 types of cars now in Group E racing. We've even got some visitors from Japan, and we've got engineers from the local plant here watching today.
3 seconds from Colin Bond back to Kevin Bartlett, and then 3.19 seconds from Bartlett back to 4th place Brian Sampson.
I was a couple of laps ahead of myself earlier. They've now completed 11 and are on their 12th. So we look at Bartlett, 3rd place, 4th place Sampson, 5th place Jerry Murphy. Similar car to Bond's.
Then comes Gary Walden taking a lapped car, one of the Alpha Suds.
See Walden tucked in fairly tightly. So we've got there a turbocharged 4 heading that bunch, a V6 unturbocharged in the Alpha, and a twin-chamber Wankel rotary in the Mazda RX-7. 3 cars or engines as different as you could wish for.
The Mitsubishi Starion, the most powerful car in the field, developing 125 kilowatts at 5,500 RPM, compared to 117 for the Alfa Romeo and 84 for the RX-7.
Gary Walden, 3rd fastest qualifier, just a 1/10 of a second slower than Fitzgerald, but the crash really dampened his chances. 3rd place, then here 4th, 5th, 6th.
The Mitsubishi has the crocodile chain moves all over the main straight. The Mitsubishi also has it all over the opposition in terms of torque. Develops 245 newton meters of torque at 3,500 RPM, compared to 219 for the Alpha and 152 for the RX-7.
That, in fact, is the strength of turbocharging. A little exhaust gas-driven impeller, which spins very fast at anything in some cars now up to 200,000 revs, but very commonly around 120,000. And then that drives another impeller that puts in air and fuel mixture under pressure to the engine. Therefore, you get a denser mixture and more power. Very simple, very light. The problem in the past has been throttle response, where as you're waiting for the exhaust gas to build up the pressure, you have to first put it into the engine. So there's always been a lag, but that's being constantly improved in turbocharged cars. And of course, it is technically the go these days in Formula One racing, as we again look at the latter trio of cars fighting for 4th, 5th and 6th place in unchanged order now for quite a number of laps.
Just a touch of Kevin Bartlett in front of them. Bartlett is now 3.36 seconds behind the race for the lead, so he's dropping back ever so slightly. Walden now down the outside, going for a slingshot run at the end of the straight. Will catch up on Jerry Murphy, who's working very hard behind the wheel. Murphy, an Alfa Romeo dealer from Brookvale in New South Wales. One of the cars that he sold moves almost out of the way in front of him, the little Alfa Sud.
Behind the leading 6, which we've seen, is Bradley Jones in another of the turbocharged Starions. Then Stephen Brook in the BMW, car number 2. And car 4, John Phillips, 9th in the front-wheel drive Cordia Turbo. And then car 8, John Giddings in the 280 ZX Datsun, a model now replaced, or missing I should say, by the 300 ZX. So quite a number of different models and very different ones in the first 10.
The leader's still down on the lap record, 69.25 seconds that lap for Peter Fitzgerald. The lap record being 69 seconds neat. And this time the slipstream breaks and Jerry Murphy's going for it down the inside on Brian Sampson.
But considerably behind him as Walden goes to the outside for a quick sweep into the corner at the end of the straight. Doesn't do either of them any good. Very similar pattern to this one up at the front of the race with Peter Fitzgerald's Starion Turbo, similar car to Brian Sampson's in 4th place, being pushed by another Alfa Romeo, Colin Bond, and they breaking away from Kevin Bartlett, whose car smoked as he came onto the bowl and looks as though he may have some mechanical problem. These Starion Turbos, one has to say, have been ultra reliable in this form of racing.
Bartlett is 3.63 seconds in front of Brian Sampson in 4th position.
As they come up now, complete 3/4 race distance, 15 laps out of 20. That's the leading pair.
And Fitzgerald now starting to get a little bit desperate as Bond really pours on the pressure, diving all over the track, whereas before the two experts have been content to establish the fact that neither of them is going to break away from this duel.
Front engine, rear wheel drive for both cars, but the gearbox in the rear in the Alfa Romeo and the Dean back axle as it's called. The Starion just with a live rear axle and a locked left front wheel there for about a second or two.
On that off-camber corner, most of the pressure at Adelaide International Raceway is placed on the left-hand side because the bowl here is the most abrasive part of the track. So the left-hand tyres really get a workout, and that lock-up is not going to be doing Fitzgerald's tyre any good at all to help it perform through corners like this.
The gap from the first pair to 3rd place Bartlett is 5.12 seconds, and from Bartlett to Sampson is 3.58 seconds.
Now Bond out of the slipstream for the first time, throwing out his challenge out the outside.
Okay, didn't get it there, but for the lapped car would have been very nicely placed to hook in to the right of Fitzgerald here. Probably the plot he's got in mind for a lap or two's time, but he's on his 17th. There's only 20, and he now has to get serious. It would be the first win for the Alfa, which he will share at the James Hardy 1000 with Riccardo Patrese, Enrico Zannarini, the Alfa Romeo PR man, actually shortly to leave Alfa. Confirmed at the Monaco Grand Prix with Patrese, a Formula 1 driver, that he will be at Bathurst to join Colin Bond in this car, but brought up to Group A specs as Bond goes down towards the inside and gets to the inside. Well, nearly sits on his bumper bar. And they come round and they complete 17. 3 remain. Sampson darts over to the same side of the track, back in 4th place to try and shake off Jerry Murphy, another of the V6 Alphas. Still Bartlett 3rd. Still 6th place. In 15 is...
Gary Walden is in 6th position.
Gary Walden.
And now Fitzgerald, knowing that the challenge is on, opens up just a little bit of a lead on Colin Bond Bond tries to get it back in the braking area and does so. Oh, does he what? With a little bit of panel work already to be done on the front right-hand side of the car. It doesn't hurt if you do a little bit more damage, I guess. Now on the bowl again, Fitzgerald high. Bond drifts up towards him.
Fitzgerald complained yesterday that Bond overtook him down the straight. Never happened before. Let's see if Colin Bond, with a slipstream, can start to do it now as they're on their 19th lap. Not close enough. Colin Bond revving the Alpha engine hard, probably up towards 7,000. Well placed as he brakes to go to the inside, but Fitzgerald knew about it. Hooks in nice and early, covers the corner. What the lead driver has to do is not to be shaken by the man in the rear vision mirror as they come up towards some lapped cars.
The lapped cars, yes.
But he has to take his line, do his thing, making sure that he covers himself but doesn't get forced offline by the car behind.
And they'll catch those cars right up on the bowl, which is where Colin Bond doesn't want any interference.
Again, a big lock-up from Fitzgerald, which tends to let him run a little bit wide as he turns into the corner onto the bowl.
But look at the torque of the car as he comes out of that corner up onto the bowl itself. Just opens up a bit of a gap on Bond, and enough, in fact, to keep him out of danger this time round the bowl. And they'll come down to get the sign for 1 lap remaining.
2.41 kilometres remain now as they head out for the final time, with Kevin Bartlett 4.78 seconds in arrears in third, and with Sampson 3.6 seconds behind him in fourth place, being harried by Jerry Murphy. Colin Bond will want to swap back to the right if he can get under the inside. Fitzgerald knew well what he was up to.
He is covering his corner very well. Fitzgerald is a good driver.
No holes, but he got very sideways there. And Bond's in, is he? But he's on the wrong side, even if he is in.
But if he can hold it there, nope.
And you have to say that Peter Fitzgerald has not done a thing wrong. Really hasn't.
Covers his corner well there again, and Colin Bond is buried in his boot.
Well, Fitzgerald really did not get put off there, and again, one has to say he did it right. Colin Bond lost a second and has no chance.
And this will give Peter Fitzgerald an even greater lead in the $200,000 Super Series as he takes the checkered flag ahead of Colin Bond with Kevin Bartlett in third position. Here's the dice for fourth position between Brian Sampson and Jerry Murphy, and it's resolved in Brian Sampson's favour, and Gary Walden will come through in sixth position.
The gap to Kevin Bartlett in third place was 4.4 seconds from the winner there, Peter Fitzgerald, and back to Sampson heading the bunch for fourth, fifth and sixth. The gap was 3.55 seconds. The race time was 23 minutes and 8 seconds, and average speed for the 20 laps of 124.6 kilometres an hour. So that was a good frantic race for the fourth round of the Super Series, the fifth round to be held next weekend at Amaroo Park.
Peter Fitzgerald retains his lead with 78 points from Brian Sampson with 70. And while we're working out the rest of the points, we do know that Colin Bond has moved up from 39 points to 57.
And before we have the final round of the Australian Touring Car Championship for you, we have a Formula V race from Adelaide Raceway, and that's coming up in just a moment.